Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Welcome to Health Oddity Podcast, episode 29. It brings me great pleasure today to welcome back a guest we had back in February. Today we've got Brad Kearns, world-renowned expert on primal living, but also a published author. And today he's here to discuss his new book. But I've got the usual cast of characters with me. We are characters. Are we not characters? Do you become caricatures after a while if we do this long enough? You start being, like Friends. The first couple of episodes are pretty good. Then at the end, it's caricatures, isn't it? Is that where we're going?
Who gets to be Ross? Who gets to be Ross? I'm not being Ross.
You're not being Ross. Okay.
No.
Well, you don't strike me as Monica.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So how you doing, Peter?
I'm all right. Thank you very much. I'll be Rachel soon with this hair. If I can get it any longer, But there you go.
And you, James?
I'm very well indeed. Thank you. Very well indeed. Looking forward to this.
And Brad, welcome back.
Oh my gosh, I'm so honored to be on the dream team here. The Four Horsemen ride again. Here we go. Get ready, people. Fasten your seatbelt.
Of the apocalypse, hopefully.
And do we have a 2 meals a day wrap or
2 meals a day coming your way? As you mentioned, today is the day, the official release date, and it's so exciting, mate.
You put him on the spot there, and he pulled it off.
I know, man. That was
brilliant.
That was heavy.
You said you've been doing other like lots of other stuff today, haven't you, as well? So you must be quite tired. So that's that's good. We like that. Just plucking that out of the air.
Not as tired as you guys, Peter. Staying up late. I appreciate you podcasting with me here from the west coast of USA.
It is 10 p.m. here. I think it's 2 p.m. for you, Brad. So that's fantastic. So this new book that is released today, which is by yourself and Mark Sisson, 2 meals a day. What was the thinking behind it? Why now? Why this book? Why this title? How have you got here, basically?
Good question, James. Thank you. And the thinking behind this one was there's nothing else we can say. We've written so many books and talked about so many different particulars of healthy eating and primal lifestyle. And we always finish a book and say, I think that's it. There's nothing else. We give our heart and soul to these books and try to have the cutting edge research in there and the best we got. And then, of course, some time goes by and we're like, what about this? What about that? So I'm really excited about this one because I think this is a book that can appeal to everyone, including the extreme performer who's been deep into this for a decade and knows all about the ketogenic diet and has tested their blood values and is very much living and breathing the cutting edge health. But it's also great to hand to someone in your family who has little to no interest and just wants to eat healthier and figure out a strategy that's simple and sustainable. That's why we have that on the subtitle of the book. Because, if you sit back and reflect for a minute, and the way I reflect is when I interact with real people, not like you guys. I mean, like people who are busy living their lives and don't have that tremendous passion and time and energy to keep up to date with all the health breakthroughs. And so I might be mixing with my childhood buddies who are working in different careers and raising families. And they'll say like, so Brad, is this thing healthy that I'm eating here, this plate of nachos? And, then we'll get into a conversation about it. And it's easy to lose people, especially with the fitness scene where, we have the extreme fitness enthusiast, and then we have someone who's too busy to work out. And so we have this huge chasm, right, where you don't need to talk to that person about supersets or negative blood flow restriction reps, coupled with a day with the compression boots on and all that nonsense. We just have to figure out a way that they're going to move their body more. So I think the theme of this book is that simple, sustainable strategy, not just for eating part of it, but also the other lifestyle elements that are so important that a lot of people forget about, or if we're just too focused on diet and we're not sleeping enough. We know from my last podcast, as well as from, the research that's been out there, that you're going to just crater all your healthy lifestyle plans if you're not, optimizing sleep.
So, I mean, you and Mark have really been at the forefront of, for many people, it will be an alternative way of eating, but very much the ancestral kind of perspective when it comes to food. And that really, for those people who don't know what that means, that is trying to think back to foods that we would have encountered pre kind of agrarian civilization, so before farming, what we evolved to eat. But obviously, since then, you've refined your thinking and you've gone through many stages of evaluation, coming across new information, experimenting on yourself. And it's very interesting to see from the books you've written over the course of your career, kind of how you've got to this stage, because it sounds like you had a very specific question you needed to answer and a specific problem that you needed to solve when you came up with this strategy for people.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And my personal journey has evolved a fair amount. As we talked about, I think last time, I'm pretty fascinated with this carnivore movement and the ability for people to heal from nagging, very troubling autoimmune and inflammatory conditions by eliminating all plant foods from the diet. And it's such a crazy notion that I myself dismissed it when I first heard about it from Fat Fueled Family host Danny Vega, one of the leading guys in the keto space. And he says, yeah, I'm eating only foods that come from a cow this month, and I feel great, and my blood work is better, and my body fat is down. And I'm like, what kind of crazy thing is that? And now it's really picked up energy as this, distinct and respected dietary strategy for a certain segment of the population that's really suffering. And that's just an aside to your question, but it illustrates how, we're constantly progressing and thinking about things differently. And we're really compelled to keep an open mind and think critically about all the information that's presented to us, rather than form these fixed and rigid beliefs about diet and then, be left behind, or maybe, not uncovering different possibilities. But now, to get around to answering the question, I think what's really come forth and really become clear now is that when you can eliminate the nutrient deficient, highly toxic modern processed foods, you will experience the most amazing health awakening you can imagine. And we don't even need to converse beyond that if you have junk in your diet, because then who cares talking about the carnivore or the keto or the vegan plant-based movement is really, popular and passionate. People are talking about this. But, if we're heading down to Starbucks to get the creamy caramel frappuccino with, all kinds of junk in there and reaching for these snacks and things that are still the centerpiece of modern culture, then we're going to be heading down the road to disease and demise and all the things that are plaguing modern society. Here in America, we have the fattest population in the history of recorded history, where 2/3 of the adult population are classified as either overweight or obese. I don't think UK is too far behind that. Hopefully they're, at least a little bit of a gap before we catch up to the grand America leader of the world in all these categories. But, that's such a disaster. And there's so many, there's so much low hanging fruit to pick off, which was, get off your butt, move around more, and quit eating junk food. And then we can talk about further health optimizations.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? Because if you, like you've just said, if someone's got junk in their diet, then the likelihood is the reason for that is because they haven't got much time to cook or look after themselves, really. So therefore, they're probably going to be working hard, burnt out, stressed, not sleeping there's all of that other stuff as well. Before you even get to food as well, there's all of that other stuff, lifestyle stuff to deal with.
That's interesting. I haven't really connected that, but you bring up a good point. And we could certainly counter argue that, but I think a lot of people are overstressed to the point where they don't have the time and energy to devote. But if you're looking for an easier way through life, a shortcut or what have you, it behooves you to, let's say, pay a little more attention to healthy eating, or cut another hour out of your day to get more sleep, and then everything's going to flow more gracefully. And the affordability thing gets thrown around there once in a while, but you can open up a can of sardines for whatever you call them, pence over there, 99 pence or a pound or two, and it's one of the most nutrient dense foods on the planet. So if you're on a budget, we can load your cart up with pasture raised eggs and sardines and mackerel and herring and the most nutritious fish on the planet. And you're going to do just fine, even with an extremely limited budget.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I really liked about your intro today, and listening, I also listened to the podcast that you did with Mark, talking about the book and what you've been talking about recently. I think that this book is really, it seems to be taking more of a not a middle ground, but certainly something that I think is much more relatable and palatable to the everyday person, which I think is, we've talked about, you've mentioned the kind of the carnivore movement and the kind of the paleo movement and keto and all this. But I think that this approach, it seems to me in this book, is something that can be much more palatable and easy to grasp, and many people can incorporate into their life. So a wider reach, if you like.
Yeah, thank you. We could still be friends if you insist on being a vegan and you can't touch those nasty animal foods. But it is, distinguished in the book as a very high risk eating strategy, because you are eliminating the majority of the most nutrient dense foods on the planet. But if you insist upon doing it, I had a great podcast guest by the name of Dr. Casey Means. She's the co-founder of Levels Health, and they make the continuous glucose monitor technology. Really interesting stuff going on there, especially for behavior modification. You put a patch on your arm and you can look on your smartphone and obtain your blood glucose values all the time, 24/7. But she chooses to live her life as a ketogenic vegetarian eater. And so with her rationale carefully described and her knowledge of nutrition science, she does a wonderful job at that. But the next person who's just cavalierly, and systematically just taking eggs and meat and fish out of their diet, they run a high risk of nutrient deficiencies. And we also are now compelled to call into question this argument that you're more eco-friendly and minimizing the damage to the planet if you avoid animal foods. And the great leaders like Dr. Paul Saladino has entire podcasts on the topic of, carbon sequestering by grass-fed, pasture-raised animals, where they're going to give you a net carbon benefit because they sequester carbon in the soil. And so the animal farm is doing less damage to the planet than mechanized farming and agriculture, growing the wheat crop with genetically modified agents that you're eating your bread with instead of your fish or your eggs or your great food there. So we can be friends with a variety of different distinct dietary choices. And we also know that whatever anyone says, it has to be sustainable. Same with fitness, right? You can have the world's greatest personal trainer come in and say, here's what you need. You have your posterior chain is weak, and so you need to work on this and work on that. And if the person's not interested, or it doesn't seem fun or convenient, all the information is going to fly out the window. So we have to do things that somehow make sense and feel reasonable and enjoyable to the individual. And that's a huge goal, is that personal preference is the driving force, and then simplicity rather than extreme complexity, because we're too busy to deal with, too much information these days.
That's a good point, because I commonly encounter people asking questions like about injuries or whatever, or diet fixes, and that in the back of your head you have the knowledge to solve it, but at the same time you can put it in front of people and you just know that it probably won't be done because there's not really a really simple context to integrate it, or perhaps they will just do it once or twice. So it sounds like what you have with this 2 meals a day is just a very simple plan that just means that it's not very difficult to deviate from. You're kind of going to be in a situation where you can plan quite easily. You're going to hit most of your needs because you've obviously done the macros correctly for individuals. So, I mean, can you go into a little bit of detail about how the system works?
Well,
without giving away the book.
yeah, we probably don't even have to call it a system, because a system implies regimentation and discipline and restriction and all these things. Not to pick on your word. I mean, you could call it a system if you want, but the system is where you cultivate an intuitive approach to eating, right? That's the system. And that's something that will be a tremendous awakening for many people. For example, to tap into your actual sensations of hunger and decide to consume your meals with that as the driving force, rather than the clock, or rather than some approach where you're restricting calories or portion sizes and wish you could eat more and wish you could have an indulgence, but you're now obsessing about it because you've deprived yourself. And so, we even have allowances for celebratory periods of life where you just get back on the horse the next day, let's say with an extended fast. And so it's just fine to kind of deviate, but the baseline is really important. And I think people give themselves so much permission to deviate here, deviate there, deviate one more time, and deviate a fourth time. And next month is when I'll really buckle down. But if you can establish a healthy baseline where these toxic modern foods are eliminated from your diet, and boy, then, it's open season. You can do whatever you want, and you can pick your most favorites and kind of drift into different eating patterns where, people ask me on an interview, what's your average eating day like, Brad? And I'll be like, well, you don't want to know, because it changes every single day and it goes by my whims. And some of it's not, textbook. Sometimes I'm eating so much chocolate. Oh yeah, here's if you can watch on the video, I found these guys Askinosie chocolates. Oh, delicious. And some days will go by where I'll reach into the bag to get another square and there aren't any squares left. And I'm like, wait a second, didn't I just open that this morning? So
that's a disappointing moment.
Some days I'll consume an entire chocolate bar. Some days I might have more than 2 meals a day. For whatever reason, extremely rare, right? But if that does happen, it'll be balanced with a lot of days where I'll just have 1 or 1.5 meals. And so you're kind of just looking for this template pattern where you honor your hunger signals, you honor your satiety signals, rather than eating absent-mindedly. Even when you've had enough, you just do it because you're going to finish the pint container of ice cream anyway. And I think we do that because we've messed up our mentality around eating so badly with all the struggling and suffering and deprivation, that now we have, kind of emotional baggage relating to our eating habits, instead of just enjoying food as one of the great pleasures of life.
It's interesting, actually. Today I had a response because I had a client who's been struggling with attendance, had a very stressful couple of months with work, and then because I got in my coaching system, I got a little message saying I need to get back on it. My diet's all over the place. I need to do something extreme to shock my system. And I was like, oh, let's take a step back here. And I can imagine sitting down, not having kind of trained the barbell lifts for a few months and then saying, right, I'm going to put 200 kilos on my back. That's not going to go well, and it's the same with diets. People just see an extreme solution. And you've come from the ancestral movement, and like anything, like ketogenic diets, veganism, they do have a fringe mentality. And what I can see you doing is trying to pull people to the center ground and say, work from the center outwards and try and find something that will work long term.
Yeah, well said. And I think you think about these extreme behaviors, and in a way it's setting ourselves up for failure because it's unsustainable. Mark Manson talks about this, where we have this thinking brain, the rational thinking brain, and then we have the emotional feeling brain. And it's the feeling brain that really runs the show. The thinking brain tries to convince ourselves that they run the show, but it's really the emotions and the triggers and all those kind of things. And so when you formulate this great plan with your thinking brain and you write it on a piece of paper, like wake up at 6 a.m. every day and get to the gym and do the workout and don't eat that many calories and cut out all sweets and go forever more. And then, you're tired, you say, forget it. And on the second night, you reach for the junk food again. It's because you didn't get buy-in from your emotional brain, because the thinking brain was just, doing something that was too daunting, not sustainable, and setting yourself up for failure and disappointment. And when you experience failure and disappointment in life, you lose your confidence, you lose your desire, you lose your willpower and your resolve to stick to things. So I think it's a really important point to do things that seem reasonable to you, that you have total buy-in, not only in the for both short and long term, right? It's okay to do this today, and it's okay to imagine doing it for the next 3 years. So that sometimes can be a challenge because we're asking you to eliminate the big 3 most toxic modern foods in the human diet, which are refined sugars, grains, and industrial seed oils. And the sugars and grains are the centerpiece of a lot of comfort foods for people all over the world. And to just walk away from that stuff, that's going to be a challenge. But I'm here to say, I've eaten a lot of food in my life. I used to be a triathlete where we were just eating constantly and throwing down all kinds of extra calories because we felt like we had a free pass. I'm sitting here with low body fat, so I can slam frozen yogurt every night if I want and enjoy it. But once you dehabituate away from these things that have been in your life for a long time, they no longer hold the same appeal. I just held up the example of the 88% dark chocolate bar. Well, when I was a kid, I wolfed down all the commercial candy bars. We have names like Snickers and Nestle's Crunch. I don't know if you have those exported across the globe, maybe so. But I ate a lot of milk chocolate, which is extremely sweet. And that was my go-to snack and treat. And then one day I learned that that stuff wasn't very healthy and that dark chocolate had a lot of health properties. And it was sort of an allowable treat if you're embracing this ancestral lifestyle. So, I started to chew on these bars, and an 88% dark chocolate bar is extremely bitter. It has no sweetness, and it's sort of dead on your palate if you're a sugar hound who has been addicted to high sugar products your whole life. But sure enough, if you give it some time, you grow to appreciate these nuanced flavors that have been suppressed by the bombarding of sugar your whole life. And then you start to become more of a more appreciative of fine culinary creations because you're attuned rather than just slamming the instant gratification foods. They call them hyper palatable foods, which is combining sugar and fat together and adding salt usually. And that's what we see are processed packaged sweets. And boy, they taste great for the 4 seconds that they're in your mouth chewing them. And then they make you feel like heck for hours afterward, whereby a truly nutrient dense meal gives you that deep and lasting satisfaction that'll keep you coming back for more once you start the process of habituating to nutritious foods and getting rid of the instant gratification foods.
It's funny that actually, number one, seed oils. When I stopped using them 6 or 7 years ago, just totally, because I used to use, groundnut oil, peanut oil, and all that sort of stuff. I used to use all this stuff, and I've got some in my cupboard that has been there. I like to keep it there just so I can look at the sell-by date, and it's from so I can know how long it is since I've ever used any, which is great because it just that was one of the things like you say, you cut these things out and you instantly feel better.
Do you think it will go up in value like whiskey?
I doubt that. I don't think so. The funny thing is, though, people go, "It'll be rancid now." It's rancid when it's bottled, isn't it? So it's one of those things. It's already off. But also, I mean, I used to be, like you've just said, I used to be the same as you with, I used to eat a lot of sweets when I was younger. They used to have the tubs where for £1 you could buy 5 chocolate bars, based on whichever ones weren't selling very well at the time and all of that. And my parents used to actually work for Nestle as well. Both of them did, because there was a factory in Newcastle just up the road from where I grew up. But so I used to get a lot. They used to bring back a lot of misshapes and all of that. So all of the stuff that wasn't that they couldn't sell from the factory, they used to just bring it home. Yeah. So we used to have a constant supply of chocolate. So after stopping eating all of that as well, not stopping eating it all, but not eating nowhere near as much as I used to. Me and my girlfriend went to this place a while ago, and I didn't have any water with me. I think it was like a trampoline park, I think, and I didn't realize how sweaty I was going to be at the end of it, because it's quite energetic, and I didn't realize how energetic it was going to be. So at the end of it, I was like, I need a drink, and they just had like a vending machine, but it didn't have any water or anything in it. So I bought a bottle of Oasis. I don't know if you've got that. It's like a just a sugary drink. It's all I had, and I had one sip, and I was just like, blimey, people drink this. I couldn't believe how sugary it was. Whereas years ago, that would have been like my go-to thing, you know. So
Yeah.
I think what you're saying, Brad. I think like once you wean yourself off of that instant gratification of sugar, it usually, what from my experience and the experience with clients, it usually takes 3 or 4 days of not having it, and then you kind of turn a bit of a corner, don't you? And you don't have that kind of craving for it. Is that in your experience? Is that kind of how it works?
Well, 3 or 4 days would be great. I mean, that's nothing. Maybe some people are going to say that they're struggling for a month or two. But I think one area that might be really appealing to people is when you're ditching these junk foods, you want to make sure that you enjoy, lavish meals and ample quantities of the approved foods. And this is sort of an intermediary step because, the title of the book's 2 meals a day. The subtitle should be, and no snacking either. But we talk about that inside the book because snacking is surprisingly destructive to your fat burning goals. And as soon as you snack on anything, even if it's a really healthy, nutritious dark chocolate bar or handful of macadamia nuts, you immediately shut off fat burning and you proceed to burn through the calories that you just consumed. So this idea of nibbling throughout the day is really destructive to managing your insulin levels and trying to drop excess body fat or maintain weight. So if you can dehabituate quickly, that's wonderful. But if you're, kind of had a lifelong pattern of enjoying all the various delicacies and treats, you're going to have to kind of make a concerted effort to, eat these wonderful, really filling and satisfying meals of nutritious food. And that will help you transition more gracefully where you do have energy to burn all the time, even if you have to eat 3 meals, or even if you have to snack for an interim period. And in my own case, when I started working with Mark Sisson in 2008, he presented to me this idea of the primal style diet based on ancestral health, based on evolutionary biology, hunter-gatherer dietary patterns. And he said, so the key feature here is no grains. And I'm like, no grains? What do you mean? No bread? Okay, well, what about cereal? No, cereal's a grain. What about oatmeal? Oatmeal is a grain too. What about brown rice instead of white? They're all grains. They're all in the same category of civilization and agricultural foods rather than hunter-gatherer foods. So when I completely eliminated all grains from my life, cold turkey one day in June of 2008, boy, there was a lot of room in my pantry, right? Because we have this stuff going into every meal almost. And so what I did was I substituted my daily morning giant bowl of cereal. And I'd been doing this since back in the athletic days. I had a salad bowl, and I'd throw in 4 or 5 different kinds of cereal. Of course, the healthy kind, not the junky, colorful stuff, but, granola and a mixture of different, Kashi was one of the brands. And then I'd have big giant scoops of non-fat yogurt and fresh berries and almond milk or coconut milk. And so it was a huge carbohydrate bomb with a lot of refined grains that have minimal nutritional value. And that thing, I had to have it every day because I was a high calorie burner and I had grown accustomed to this being my fuel for a big, busy day. So what I did, instead of just ditch that and walk into life in a fasted state and think I could immediately transition, I instead made this incredibly beautiful, lavish omelet every single morning with 6 eggs and sauteed vegetables and sliced avocado on top and melted cheese and bacon bits inside and salsa. And I'd have this thing that fit the entire plate, a 6-egg omelet. That's like 3 that's like 3 omelets at the restaurant. And I would enjoy that thing every morning, and that would sustain me for hours afterward. And I had absolutely zero complaint from missing my precious cereal bowl that I'd had my whole life since I was a kid. Now, how many months went by? It was probably 6 months or 9 months or something where I woke up and I'd realize, I'm not actually hungry for that gigantic omelet every single morning, first thing in the morning or early on. So then I sort of entered this gateway to the wonderful world of intermittent eating, Mark coined it, or fasting, whatever you want to call it, where I didn't have to have an initial morning meal, and I actually felt fine until 10:30 a.m. when I'd go in and make maybe 2 hard-boiled eggs instead of a gigantic omelet. Or some days I'd wait till noon and have a big salad or whatever I was into at the time, or a big giant slice of fish or whatever. So it's getting through that gateway and accessing these wonderful benefits that you see on the cover of many books, fast your way to a lean body and all this kind of thing. But most people are needing to have a more strategic approach, because there's too much suffering and deprivation going on, and actual failure when someone's not metabolically healthy enough to go and be skipping meals or restricting carbs to the extreme out of the diet. It has to come at the proper time. And so we really emphasize, and that's why you said, James, that this book is kind of opening up to more people, where if you don't have this exceptional metabolic health, hey, here's the baby steps. Get rid of this junk, start bringing in as much good food as you want, so you're always satisfied. And then you can progress steadily and notice one day, oh gosh, I didn't need to reach in my drawer at 2:30 p.m. for a snack. I actually felt fine the rest of the afternoon after my nutritious lunch.
I think I heard I listened to your podcast you did recently with Rob Wolf, and he was talking about fasting in a way that some people now, because it's become so it's almost mainstream. It's become so popular.
Yeah,
people just kind of latch on to the intermittent fasting, but don't actually pay attention to what they do eat when they eat. So it's almost like just fasting for 18 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. But then when you go back to eating, if you haven't actually, cultivated these new habits and got this new knowledge about how to cook and eat well, you just go back to eating the same rubbish you were eating before. The fasting, it's destructive really, rather than something positive.
Yeah, it's also going to be unsustainable, whatever you're doing, if you're not doing it in the correct manner. So I guess that opens up a nice segue to saying, look, the first thing here is to ditch these nasty nutrient deficient foods. And then the second one is to strive to eat less frequently. But if you just do one and not the other, like you just described, hey, I'm fasting, I'm doing great, I'm waiting till 12 noon to have my candy bars, that's not the desired approach. And then on the other side, which is a huge portion of people that are in the progressive health movement here, is they're making good food choices. They're just eating way too much of it and too frequently. And we used to hold these weekend retreats. They were wonderful. They were called Primal Con. We did 9 of them across North America over a period of years, several years ago. And people would come from all over the world. We'd have a gathering of 100 people, or 160, I think was our biggest one. And so we'd cater these meals to have the most exquisite 100% primal buffet of all these great things. So the big salads and the entrees, we'd have fish, and we'd have these giant bowls of guacamole and bacon, and people would load up their plates and have we fed them smoothies in the morning, a giant lunch, and a giant dinner. So we were off the 2 meals a day plan. And oh my gosh, the people would pile their plates so high that it was absolutely mind-blowing. And Mark even had to give a presentation at one of them, and he says, hey, a lot of you guys are talking to me about some frustration with losing excess body fat, and the size of the plates I saw at this buffet, I can't even believe it. You're eating twice as much as a lean, young, athletic male. And I think part of it was the ceremonial aspect of being at the event and enjoying the amazing presentation on the buffet. But there is a way to kind of sabotage your goals by eating and snacking too much and not paying attention to your hunger signals, or just having free license. I think in the keto community, we've seen this where it became so popular that now you can go to the store and buy stuff that says keto on the bag, and it's a bar, or it's a bag of this, or a bag of that, and you're munching down keto approved snacks all day long and wondering why you're not dropping excess body fat. So we have the good food choices, and then eating less frequently and allowing stored body fat to rise to center stage as your go-to energy source, rather than whatever food's on your plate, even if it happens to be fantastically healthy food.
I think what we call it in buffets is buffet panic. where you just see people. I mean, I was actually, this is in Iceland, back to Iceland. Every place we went, there was a busload of tourists that would suddenly turn up at the restaurant we were at. They turn up
Every
almost,
time.
and then they just raid the buffet, and then you'd be standing there. I mean, in Britain, we like to queue. And so I was obeying the rules in my mind, but they obviously saw, they were just completely transfixed by the food. And then you'd get there and it'd be like one chicken leg, a little bit of, there's always the soup. There's always loads of soup left at the end of a buffet.
Some of that putrefied shark. Have you ever had that in Iceland?
No, I didn't want it.
It's disgusting.
But I think you made a good point about loving food and taking care of it, because how many people have sat there in front of clients or even had conversations with friends and they say, I love food, that's why I can't, stop eating. I love food, I'm a foodie. And then you go down what they're eating and it's like stuff they get from service stations.
Yeah. I've had that. Someone said to me they were a foodie, and I didn't say it, but I just want to say what you mean is you're just a person who likes to eat. That's what they meant. They didn't mean I like to sample different types of foods and cook this and use these spices and all that. It was like, no, I just like to eat a lot of food. That was it. And it didn't matter what it was.
Well, we also have to acknowledge there's a huge problem here with the addictive properties of sugar and grain food. Dr. William Davis, best-selling book, Wheat Belly, talks about this gliadin protein. The name of the protein is gliadin in modern-day wheat crop, and it has been shown to have to hit the opioid receptors in the brain and have addictive properties much in the way that the hard drugs do. And the effect is to the extent that you are prompted to consume an additional 300 calories per day when you have bread and bread products in your diet. And that's why if you look on labels of processed foods, the food manufacturers know this, and they will sprinkle in a little bit of gluten into a product that has no, there's no business having bread in this packaged product that's something else, but they know about the addictive properties. And then sugar, oh my goodness, even to an amazing extent. There's a good book by Dr. Robert Lustig. He's one of the leading anti-sugar crusaders in the world, called The Hacking of the American Mind. You might call it the hacking of the British mind if they do a translation deal, but he talks about all these things in modern life that are hijacking our dopamine, our pleasure pathway in the brain, to the extent that we no longer have the ability to really experience the deep and lasting pleasure from, for example, eating a nutritious diet, sitting down and having quiet meals where you're having a nice small portion that, a quality restaurant prepared, and the taste is exquisite because you're eating it slowly and it's wonderful, as opposed to just wolfing down sugary products and things like that. And the dopamine triggers extend to working out too much, right? Being a workout freak where you're going for the endorphin high all the time, to the great detriment of the young human male. The combination of pornography and video games are now satisfying all those primary biological drives of the human male in an interface with your screen, so that they don't have the drive or the need to go out in real life and get a job and earn money and win the attention of a female prospect. And so it's pretty sobering to realize that diet's one part of this, but when we have these dopamine triggering foods in our diet, the hyperpalatable foods, we're going to eat too much, we're going to gain excess body fat, we're going to have a hard time stepping away or making any changes because we're truly addicted. Same with being addicted to the text messaging on your mobile device. For the first time in the history of humanity, we have the opportunity for what the research scientists call intermittent variable rewards. And the best example is a slot machine. You pull the slot machine, you never know what you're going to get. And that's why people can sit there for 7 hours zoned out, continuing to pull the arm, because they're always getting that stimulation, that dopamine trigger. And that's pretty much that's pretty much how you can get into a tailspin of dependency, where it's hard to make these changes that you wish you could, but you still find yourself reaching for those hyper palatable foods.
I saw something on that with social media, actually. I think it was what's his name, Dr. Huberman, I think he's called.
Andrew Huberman, good
Andrew
one.
Huberman.
Yeah.
And he was saying people on their phones checking social media all the time, they're getting that dopamine hit. I think it was the dopamine hit, but then when they go, it only lasts for so long. So they're actually making themselves more depressed. the more you look at it, the more you're making yourself depressed. So it's kind of self-fulfilling, which is just.
And we're hitting kids at a very young age in which they're very susceptible to the reward kind of mechanism, the addiction mechanism, at a time when they're teenagers, when their brains are developing, when they're, we all got pretty addicted to things as kids. I've still got that stack of White Dwarf magazines and my miniatures,
I might have
painting miniatures.
Well.
So, I've got obsessive about things, and as a teenager, if you get them young, then obviously you've got a lifelong customer. But I mean, that brings me to a question I've been thinking while you've been talking, which is sometimes it feels like a massive tidal wave, that we're being hit by multiple things, the kind of sedentary nature of modern kind of jobs, the processing of modern food, we've discussed the social media aspect as well. So we've got all these things that are kind of bearing down on society. What gives you the motivation to keep writing books and having such a positive take on things? I mean, we're all in the health industry, so we've all gone through this process, but what have you done to kind of, I suppose, think deeply about this, why you're doing it?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. I think, when we have a passion for the work we're doing, that's when we can be most effective. So I'm kind of walking my talk in every way. 99.9% of the time, what I'm communicating to others is something that I aspire to do or have, had success with myself. And I think that's what keeps us going, is that enthusiasm for things that have improved your own life. And, I'm a parent. My kids are now in the adult years, and I'm doing my best and continue to do so to be a positive influence. But you realize that, you can open your mouth and yabber as much as you want, and it has about 1% effectiveness in comparison to walking your talk and leading by example. And I think that's the case with anything we do, is that we have to be all in ourselves. Otherwise it's kind of like the politicians who turn out to be exposed as liars or doing ridiculous things when they emerge into power. They're not really what they talk about or what they try to convey as an image or a brand. And so I guess that's one answer that comes to mind for me. And the other one is, man, my heart is heavy because I've had the great privilege of, enjoying a healthy lifestyle to date. I'm 56 years old now. I expect to live for many more years and feel great and pursue peak performance goals. So I'm actually focusing a lot of my content and my contribution on kind of my peer group, because I want to, promote the beauty of pursuing peak performance throughout life and maintaining that passion and that competitive intensity that many of us had when we were in our schoolboy years, right? And we all have stories. And if you go to the pub, you can ask each person there, hey, what was your favorite sport when you were a youth? Oh, mate, I reckon I could have been a professional footballer, but then I had to go work in the factory instead. It's like, okay, everyone's got a story, everyone's got an excuse. And then most of us are sitting on the couch watching others perform in their glory days. But the truth is that we can all step outside and pursue something outside of our current comfort zone, whatever that is. And if you've been on the sidelines for a long time, don't go jumping into the A division community football league, because you're going to get slammed. But maybe you can go to the park and kick the ball around for 20 minutes and huff and puff and break a sweat, and then see that this new path opens for you in life, rather than just being a spectator who's constantly entertained, like we discussed with your mobile device and with your Netflix queue and all these things that now we've created the most softest and most comfortable, decadent, luxurious human experience possible, where we don't even have to work to get food. We can just click a button on our computer and someone comes to our door and delivers it. So you're not going to enjoy that. You're just not going to enjoy that meal as much as if you ride your bicycle down to the farmer's market on the weekend, talk to the vendors, talk to the farmers, make a careful selection, come back, open up a book, make a proper recipe, invite others to enjoy a social experience rather than munching down food while you're watching something on a digital screen. And I want people to kind of awaken to that, because that's what's been a lot of my life. I mean, we're in those age groups now, all of us on the screen here, where you had a certain period of your life that was free from internet connectivity and mobile devices. And you can all reference, if you're watching on video, everyone's nodding their head. Yeah, I used to play in the forest, and my mother rang a loud bell, and I ran, into to dinner time. And we all have that. And the kids today don't even know what we're talking about. So that's a heavy heart for me as a parent. So I want to, connect with the younger audience as well as the older guys who are aging more quickly than they deserve to be.
And I've seen recently, just referencing what you talking about staying competitive, I've been watching, I think it's been on your Instagram feeds, the recent practicing high, your high jump. You've been putting quite a few bits on recently, which is fantastic. Practicing all the warm ups and the run ups and doing your jumps. So you still compete at high jump, don't you?
Yeah, thanks, James. I mean, it's something you could call it silly, but what's interesting to me is that it means a lot to me. And I'm a very competitive person. I was a professional athlete. I was national champion and ranked number 3 in the world at my best as a triathlete. So I have that intense competitive drive in myself, and I need an outlet for it. And I love to cultivate it. But right now, it's when I jump over the fence and sneak into the school that's closed to practice on their high jump pits, and I have to carry my own standards and throw them over the fence and retrieve them and set them up. And when I clear a bar and I execute what I'm trying to do, it means as much to me right now at age 56 as crossing the finish line and winning the national championships when I was a young guy and on ESPN and getting a big giant check at the award ceremony. And this was my career and my livelihood and all those things. The charge or the excitement that goes off is the same. It's the same hormonal experience. So we all have that potential to be, a hero in our own minds, or, pursue our own personal legend, as they call it. And I think that's, a great thing that will keep you kind of focused when you write down all these goals that you wonder why you haven't adhered to your dietary goals this year. Well, maybe there's nothing coming up that's lighting you up. I remember I'm working with this Russian high jump coach. He's incredible. His name's Victor, and he was a former Olympian in the triple jump. He was 9th in the Olympic Games in Atlanta. He's a big time athlete, and now he's older, and he does coaching in the community. I was so glad to connect with him, and I showed up to the track for our first lesson in high jump, and we're talking for only a couple minutes. And he has that direct, Russian style, probably different than the polite and, pleasant Americans. And he says, so are you going to reduce your body weight? And I'm like, are you serious? I'm a health expert and pictured on Instagram jumping up in the air and wearing tight clothes and appearing in fitness videos for the Primal Blueprint courses. And this guy's just straight up like, you could lose a little body weight and you'll jump higher. And I thought it was like the most beautiful comment, and I smiled, and it's like, the mofo is right. I can take it up another notch if I want to be a really competitive athlete. Of course, the doctor's not going to tell me that my health is at risk because I have 11% body fat, but gee, what if I got down to 8? That would be fabulous. So even I, at a point where most people would look at me and say, oh, that guy looks pretty healthy and he's still athletic, there's always another level to go up to. And it's such a wonderful thing to strive for. So yeah, man, it might seem ridiculous, but I'm trying to get that six pack glistening even harder in the next Instagram picture. Okay.
That's where most people would just go, I'll just take a pool. You don't need low body fat for that. It's much easier.
I suppose that's probably a good place to kind of to call it. I've always been absolutely fascinating this chat, because I listen to your podcast and you get a really wide range of guests, and certainly for anyone listening to this our podcast, if you do have a time and you are someone who likes podcasts, then please do check out BRAD, because you really get a great range of people, subject matter experts, people that you obviously have a great interest in their story as well. And you, as I said in our last time we met, you do have a habit of breaking down very complex information into a kind of very simple kind of
Palatable.
yeah, they're palatable and very easy to consume, so that you don't feel like you've done everything wrong in your life.
Wow,
I mean,
appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, you were a triathlete back in your 20s and 30s, and I was smoking quite a lot and drinking. But it does, that bit you said about, like your taste buds change when you reduce your sugar. I mean, I've had clients, because my initial program with clients is low carbohydrate, and people say, oh, like ham tastes sweet, meat tastes sweet. All these things started tasting different, and I had that experience when I stopped smoking, because you have this kind of ash in your mouth for most of the day, and then all of a sudden your kind of taste buds come alive and the world becomes technicolor.
That's on
gotta be
sorry, I was
nice.
going to say that's on Black Books, isn't it? There's a show over here, and the guy Bernard Black, he smokes loads, and then the guy says to him, he goes, "What are you eating?" He goes, "I don't know, it's some sort of delicious biscuit." And he goes, "No, it's not, it's a coaster."
So, Brad, if people want to get hold of the 2 Meals a Day book, and obviously find out more about you, I mean, probably most of our listeners, I think, will have heard the first one with you as well, but in case people didn't, how can people kind of find out more about you, follow you, and get hold of the book that's come out today?
Oh, thanks, James. You can go look at 2mealsadaybook.com, TWO mealsadaybook.com, and there's some pre-order bonuses. Even though the books, this show is being released while the book's available, we'll still give you the bonus items, and it's kind of fun. You get a sneak peek PDF you can share with other people, a discount for shopping on the Primal Kitchen website, an audio summary of the book, and then at bradkearns.com you can connect with me. You can see these wild and crazy videos where I'm talking about high jumping or breaking the Guinness World Record in speed golf, and be entertained, and follow the B-Rad podcast. I appreciate the plug, because it's really fun to be in that seat, being an interviewer. I love being a guest too, but just connecting across the world is so fascinating, that we can share information so readily, and we're all pursuing the dream of health together. And boy, I'm such an honor to come back again and talk with you guys, and I appreciate the great work you're doing.
Thank you so much, Brad. It's an absolute it's been an absolute honor and absolute pleasure to have you on again. Paul, are you going to give us a final thought today?
Oh. No, that just caught me on the spot then. It's like, I might end up just doing a rap instead. No one wants to hear that. No, just be a man umming and erring. It'll be no. I mean, it's for me, as a personal trainer and coach, I come across so many people, and food is one of the things that really it can define people's lives, both positively and negatively. And people's relationship with food is very complex. And as a coach, I'm always trying to find a way of creating habits and behaviors that are going to stick long term. And it was interesting listening to your podcast with Mark, where you were talking about your evolution of thought, because I think we've all gone through some kind of evolution of thought, from being, I started out learning about film acetone, for example. So I was totally into that zone for many years. And then I started coming across new information that just clicked another part of the puzzle, really, and sent me down a slightly different route. And what I've learned is that you do need to be focused on one element. You do need to commit yourself to something. But at the same time, you have to have one ear kind of listening to see what's working elsewhere, because you never know how you can improve it. And I certainly noticed that from when you were talking with Mark, how you're going, you know what, maybe we could do something slightly different and get a better result.
Yeah, well said. I appreciate it.
Peter, anything you want to say?
Well, not really. I was just I was gonna say something similar to you, actually, Paul. There, just reiterate. It's not because I'm tired or anything. I was actually going to say what you were going to say, but no, just reiterate. It was good to listen to kind of the evolution. So where this book has come from, and what you've tried in the past, and you're like, oh, right, we've done everything now. There can't be possibly anything else because we've tried everything and we've gone through. Then it's like, no, there is another way, or there is something else we can add to this over the evolution. And what it's good to hear about is somebody who's been in the industry in one way or the other, one form or the other, for so many years, just being consistent and saying, this, like, it's the fundamentals are all kind of the same. There's different ways of doing something, but the fundamentals are very much the same, of just incorporating this stuff into your lifestyle, that it fits around what you do. So so thank you. It just makes perfect sense. So I love it.
Thank
James.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Brad, for joining us again. Thank you so much, Pete. Thank you so much, Paul. If you're enjoying listening to this podcast, please please subscribe, please leave us a review, 5-star reviews, and share with your friends on social media, and leave a review wherever you listen to us. So we will be back next week. We have 2 great guests next week. We have Josh Hillis joining us, and then Dan John joining us for his 3rd visit to the Health Oddity podcast. But those podcasts will be released over the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks. And obviously Brad's great podcast with 2 Meals a Day will be out first of all. So thank you all. We appreciate you, and we will catch up with you very, very soon. Take care.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Oddity.